What's up guys, it's MTGMatt for you, and today we're going to continue with the previous season of Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths, and I've also got a new juicy Mythic Rare for you at the end, so stay tuned for the whole video. So let's jump right into the first card, that is Rooting Moloch, a 5-mana 4 for a lizard in red. And when Rooting Moloch enters the battlefield, exile our card with a cycling ability from your graveyard. Until the end of your next turn, you may play the card, and you can cycle the Moloch itself for 2 generic mana. So, it's an overcosted creature which can basically draw you a specific card from your graveyard, is so to say. And since this card has a cycling ability, it actually lets you draw maybe like an additional card. Is this worth 5 mana? I don't think so, especially because the creature itself doesn't have any additional utility apart from this cycling value. So given the current preview cards, there is going to be, I think, an interesting cycling archetype. However, I don't think this creature is going to make the cut, so as I'm trying to introduce a star rating now, I would give this creature 2 stars. 2 stars simply because it has cycling 2 on it, so maybe it could be used just for that purpose, and in some situations it might give you some additional value. Next up we've got Thieving Otter, cute little 3-mana 2/2 creature in blue. With the effect, whenever Thieving Otter leaves card damage to an opponent, draw a card. This effect is one of the more useful ones, especially for a common card. At 3 mana you probably have better options than Thieving Otter. However, just in a vacuum, I think there's a nice creature because it's a nice effect in itself. You deal damage to an opponent, you draw a card. In theory, I think the only deck where this could see play is a mono blue tempo deck. However, at 3 mana I have much better options, so although let's put it this way, because the effect is nice, I think I would give this a 2-star rating. Next we got Bastion of Remembrance, 3 mana enchantment in black, and when it enters the battlefield you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Now I think this card is very, very juicy. And I think this card alone could carry maybe like an Orzhov sacrifice style deck or Rakdos sacrifice style deck, because we already have in standard, for example, Colorless Familiar with Witch's Oven, this combo, and this combo gets even stronger with Bastion of Remembrance. So I think this card is actually really, really powerful. And makes it so that you can drain your opponent over time and you also gain life at the same time, which makes it harder for your opponent to kill you down. So I think that's actually a really good card, and I would give this between actually 3 to 4 stars, even more in the 4-star range. I think this card is extremely good. You get a little body that can block immediately, and then just over time you can drain out your opponent really, really well. Next we got Lavabrink Adventurer, 3 mana 3/3 human soldier in white, and when it enters the battlefield you choose odd or even, and Lavabrink Adventurer has protection from the chosen converted mana cost. So I see 2 uses basically for this card. One use is use this as a sideboard card, specifically against the odd and even type of decks that probably are going to come up with the companion mechanic. And in this case it's a nice sideboard card because you put this in your sideboard, you play for example against an odd deck, you put this from the sideboard in your main deck and match 2, and then when it comes down you choose odd and your soldier has protection against all cards of your opponents, which is extremely powerful. So that's one use. On the other hand, and why I think this card is so cool is, you can also put this into a main deck, And it's a card that tests your knowledge of the game, because if you put this in your main deck, first off, you gather information about your opponent as you're starting to play against your opponent. And if you have a good knowledge of the current meta, you know the deck your opponent is playing, then you're, for example, going to know the common creatures your opponent's playing, the common removal spells, and so on. And if you have that knowledge, you can simply have some, I would say, probability calculation in your head, which cards are most likely are going to be in my opponent's deck that can remove this creature. And if you know that, which of those cards are mostly odd or mostly even, and then you just choose one of these to get a very sticky creature on board. Now, is a 3-mana 3/3 exciting? In itself, it's not, but if you know that it's relatively protected against most of your opponent's stuff, you can use this creature to buff it, equip stuff to it, and so on, right? So what I like about this card is that it tests the knowledge. It's a nice sideboard card, but still I think it's rather situational, so I would just give this card a 3-star rating. Next up we got In One Bite, a sorcery in white for 1 white mana, which says as an additional cost to cast a spell, tap an untapped creature you control, and exile target tapped creature, put a +1/+1 counter on the creature tapped to cast the spell. So, this is a tricky one, because at first sight it seems pretty cool, right? You exile a creature of your opponent, and then you even put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures. However, the big downside is that the creature opponent must be tapped. So it's a bit restricted in its use, and it's also a sorcery. However, I think like a deck where I could see this is, for example, if you play a mono white deck, an aggressive mono white deck, and I used to put in the soldier in the mono white deck, which can tap a creature with converted mana tools 2 or greater for 1 mana. So that's like a good general card to put into this aggressive deck, because it shuts down some of your opponent's big creatures you can't deal with. And then if you have this soldier anyway in your deck, you could put in 1 bite, and you have this 2-card combo where you have your soldier basically pay 1 mana to tap one of your opponent's creatures, and then you tap another mana and tap one of your creatures to exile this very card. Now, question, is that worth that if you have 3 mana exile target creature removals currently in the game? Maybe. I wouldn't completely write it off. I think this is a card you have to experiment with to really know it. So I wouldn't completely write this card off immediately, but probably you just use your Prison Rams or Banishing Lights to deal with your opponent's tricky creatures. So for me, I wouldn't completely write this card off, so I would give this between like 2 to 3 stars, but probably more in the 2-star range. Next up, we got Thwart the Enemy in green for 3 mana. It's an instant, and it prevents all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So it's a one-sided fog effect only for your opponent's creatures. Now, do you want that for 3 mana in a green deck? I don't think so, because I don't know what kind of deck you would play this. So if you're playing a green deck, you'll probably have big creatures that will be bigger than your opponent's creatures anyway. And if you're looking for ways to deal with your opponent's creatures, I think you have straight up removal like spells in green, like bite effects where your creatures deal damage equal to the power to another type of creature. And then again, if you actually want to have a fog effect, just use what's it called? The roots effect. Let me just look this up for a second. Roots. Root Snare, right. If you want to have a fog effect, just use Root Snare for 1 mana less. So I don't see where this card would see play, and that's why I'll give it a 1-star rating. Next up we have Go for Blood, 2 mana sorcery in red, which says target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, and then it has got cycling 1, and it's a sorcery. So I don't think this is too bad actually. If you're playing a Gruul type deck, you can use this as situational removal, and most of the time your creature should be bigger than your opponent's creature. So this is straight up removal at sorcery speed. And then again, if you don't need it, you can just cycle it. Now the question is, if you're playing Gruul, 2 mana, don't you just want to use something like a Domri's Ambush, which simply seems better? And is the added flexibility of cycling worth it? I'm not sure actually. And also, I don't think in like a cycling card type deck this would see play, because I assume that cycling type of decks are going to work with tokens, drawing a lot of cards and so on. So I think I would give, it's not completely useless, but for those reasons I would give this a 2-star rating. Next up we've got Evasion Protocol, a 2 mana enchantment in blue, which says whenever you cycle a card you may pay 1. If you do, exile target creature or artifact you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So you have a fuzzer-like effect that you can get for cycling cards and paying some additional mana. And I think this can actually be useful simply because of the fact that it just costs 2 mana. So you can put it down early and get even more value out of your cycle cards. And you know, like this effect, exile one of your creatures, return to the battlefield, obviously triggers their enter the battlefield effects again, which is always a lot of value. So I would give this a 3-star rating. I think this can see some play. This can see some play. The only issue I might see with this is that maybe if you cycle very often, this can become very mana intensive. But I think this can find some place, so I would give this 3 stars. By the way, before I forget, I always give these ratings out of 5 stars. 5 being the best and 1 being absolute garbage. So there you go. And then next up we've got a juicy one. I really like this card. Also synergized with cycle abilities. It's Ominous Sea. Also a 2 mana blue enchantment, which says whenever you draw a card, put an Omen counter on Ominous Seas. And then you can remove 8 Omen counters to create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. And you can also cycle this enchantment for 2 mana. So I really like this card. Basically in every deck you want to draw cards anyway. And if you play like a cycle deck in blue, or a draw a lot of cards type of deck in blue, this card can give you huge creatures for free as a payoff. You basically have to invest the initial 2 mana, and then over time gives you value and value. And you can also abuse this enchantment with proliferate effects. So what comes to my mind is Contentious Plan, for example, which is this 2 mana, I think it's a sorcery actually in blue, which lets you draw a card and proliferate. Or there is Flux General for 3 mana in blue, which lets you proliferate every time you cast a non-creature spell. And in cycling decks, you probably want to cast a lot of non-creature spells. So, I think this is a really cool card. I definitely want to try this out, build a deck around it. And what comes to my mind just now is that you could maybe build a deck where you have Omnis Sea and Shark Typhoon, which already got revealed, and put those together to create a deck which is built around cycling a lot of cards, getting through a deck fast, and this way put out creature tokens for free. Sounds like a lot of fun. Is it going to be competitively viable? I'm not sure. I would also give this 3 stars, just from a competitive point of view, but I think this card is going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be pretty juicy. And now we're coming to the Mythic Rare that I promised you that got revealed, and that is Riel the Everwise. It's a 3-mana 0/3 legendary human wizard in Izzet colors, which says Riel the Everwise gets +1/+0 for each instant sorcery card in your graveyard, and whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So I think this is an excellent card to support a cycle kind of archetype where you draw a lot of cards and you want to get additional value from drawing cards. And I think it's also very fair that it comes down at 3 mana. It's cheap enough that you can get a lot of value out of this. And the spells that draw you more cards and let you discard cards are cycle effects, for example, or like what's it called? This possibility spell where you discard a card to draw 2 cards in red. This will draw you an additional card, so it's a lot of value that you can get out of this card. I think the +1/+0 is simply, it's a nice bonus. It's not actually relevant, but I think this card can support this one specific deck type and does that very well. That being said, question is, is that deck type going to be viable? If so, this card should go in there. If not, then this card is like nice in a vacuum, but is pretty restricted in which types of decks you can put it. So for those reasons combined, I actually think I would give this a 3-star rating, simply because I think for these very specific decks it's a really, really good card, but in general the use is actually pretty restricted. So that's why I'll give this a 3-star rating. So there you go, folks. This has been a review for the spoilers so far for April 6th. Stay tuned for more card reviews, because we're not even halfway through all the Ikoria Lair of Behemoths decks. Cards.